the YaST security module. In this topic, we're going to be covering how to work with the security settings of the YaST security modules, the pre-configured security settings available there, and how to work with custom security settings as well. YaST has its own security center and hardening module. This is a central hub or clearinghouse to configure security-related settings that are particular to SUSE Linux Enterprise. We can work with things like logins, password creations, password requirements, boot permissions, user creation, user default during creation, default file permissions, and so forth. It is launched simply by going to the YaST Control Center under Security and Users and Security Center and Hardening. It always starts with the security overview as the first screen that you see. Here is an example of that security overview. Notice that on the left we have navigation, on the right we have the settings particular to the thing selected on the left, and we have links to change or modify those things that are listed here, as well as a contextual help link to give you information about what each item does and what best practices might be used. So let's understand the pre-configured security settings. Now we can use this module as described. If we click the predefined security configuration under this security module, we can select predefined settings or use custom settings in order to have our own direct control of what's going on SUSE Linux. So what are the custom security settings that we most likely would work with? Well, if you select the custom settings, it would be any of the items on the left that you change will automatically be moved or be a part of the custom settings you've defined. In other words, the predefined items up above custom setting here would give you a preset and already configured way of hardening or defining your security profile for a machine. If you make changes on the left side, it will automatically switch to custom settings as you have deviated from the predefined security settings. In other words, this link doesn't necessarily change anything if you put the radio in custom settings. By default, when you make a change that's outside of the other settings, it will move to custom settings as well. So what changes could we make? Well, we can go in and change the password settings, such as minimum acceptable password length. 5 probably isn't good enough for most enterprise environments. We let you decide though. You can come in here and define what is okay. How many passwords are we going to remember? What encryption method would we use for our passwords? We can also set the age on passwords and how many days before the expiry of a password do we warn you about that change. What about boot settings? Well, how do we interpret Control-Alt-Delete? By default, if you're in a sudo terminal and you do a Control-Alt-Delete on a SUSE Linux box, it reboots the box. You can also tell it to do nothing or to halt the system. We can also work with the graphical interface, the GNOME Desktop Manager Login Manager as well, and make changes to the way it works. We can also work with other settings that are specific to the functioning of a SUSE Linux box as related to booting. What about login? What is the delay when someone enters an incorrect password? It's 3 seconds by default. You can change that as well. When adding a user, what about group ID and UID values? What are the defaults? What are the minimums? How are those defined? We can see those and change those as needed here as well. And of course, there are some other miscellaneous settings that we can work with to define our security profile in this hardening center.